demand change through their activism and make sure that their voices are heard. Activism can come into many, many different ways. And voting is an act of activism. When we work together, when we organize, when we vote together, we can create the types of communities and countries that we want to build. We know that your vote matters. Voting for leaders at every level of government is a foundational step to ensure that our justice systems and the people that are in charge in our community reflect the communities that they serve. Sometimes it can be difficult to connect our criminal justice system with voting. While some criminal justice decision makers are elected by the public, many are appointed by elected public officials at the federal, state, and local level. So our vote and our voices truly matter. Sometimes it's hard to know which elected officials actually influence what you're doing. So I'm going to run through a few on this call right now, just so you can connect the dots between the people in charge and your real life. At the local and state level, a mayor of another local government, usually the mayor or another local government official usually appoints the chief of police in your city that manages law enforcement. A sheriff is typically an elected position that oversees a county and is responsible for enforcing the law. District attorneys or chief prosecutors are considered the top law enforcement officials because they decide when an arrest leads to a charge. They can either be elected or appointed depending on your state or county. Governors play a crucial role in ensuring public safety and security, and they oversee state agencies that implement criminal justice and public safety policy and programs, including state police, corrections, and juvenile justice. The majority of states elect judges to the state Supreme Court. The majority of states elect judges to the state's Supreme Court, while others are appointed depending on the state's constitution. The state legislator is responsible for the policies that define what constitutes a crime. In the procedures for responding to that crime, sentencing structures, and the funding of government agencies that are responsible for dealing with offenders in crime. These are all positions that are elected at the state level. This is why your primaries matter. This is why every single election matters. And this is why when we vote in each election in each office, we can take our power back. It's not only about the presidential election. It's about having our voices represented on every single level. We're fighting to expand access to online voter registration to vote by mail and in-person voting, because we know that when Americans make their voices heard, it only strengthens our democracy. We all saw what happened this past weekend or this past week in Georgia and then previously with Wisconsin. Voter suppression is real. Voter suppression are tactics that are not overt, but they are tactics that do influence the vote of people that are minorities. This can include voters, not enough polling places in places that are heavily trafficked by people of color. That also can mean not adequately being prepared for the amount of people that may be attending, such as not having enough polling stations or not having the adequate machines. There's so many ways that voter suppression tactics really can come and influence the vote. And the whole goal of it is to depress people of color to make sure that they feel that their voices are not heard. It's a feeling they want to associate with voting. They want you to feel as though you are not able to have your voice heard. And it's not going to be counted. So what I tell you right now is this feeling is intentional. And when you know someone is trying to make you feel a certain way intentionally, you have to be aware of it. You have to counter it and you have to get prepared. So let's get prepared to vote about it. Let's get prepared to vote about all of the issues, your interests, your values, your vote for your communities, your vote for your futures. During this time of uncertainty, the mission of When We All Vote will not waver. We will continue to encourage, to encourage and inform our communities on the importance of voting and how to keep pushing forward in the efforts of voter engagement. As the next generation of leaders, you all have a vital role in helping us accomplish this goal. You guys are the ones that help change your mom's mind about what products they should be using. You guys are the ones that are shaping the future you want to live in. That is why this upcoming election is really important for you. Please continue to show up for yourselves, show up for your family, show up for one another. If there's more you want to do right now, here are some actions you can take with When We All Vote, and then I will open up for questions. Number one, you can register to vote. If you go to whenweallvote.org/register, you can check your status, make sure that you're registered to vote. Step two, you can organize. Squad up with When We All Vote, become a voting squad captain, and get trained on how to organize the people that are closest to you or your surrounding community. Step three, mobilize. Take our safe voting pledge, get 5 people to sign the pledge, and stand with us for fair, safe, and accessible elections if you do not want to see any more voter suppression tactics happening in your state. So with that, again, my name is Priestley Johnson. I am here to take any questions, and I am so happy to be here with you all today.
Priestley, thank you so much for that call to action, in addition to the information that you gave to us regarding voting. We really appreciate that. So we have a couple of questions in the chat right now. The first question we have is from Dr. Tony Dickerson. She indicates Indiana ranked 3rd in the country for voter suppression. What can we do to turn this around?
Yeah, the work really starts now, Michelle. And that's a really great question, because you guys are thinking the right way. We do need to take action. So what can we do to counter this? That means calling your the people responsible for elections, your state secretary's office, making sure that there is enough polling locations in your jurisdiction. Make sure that you know where your polling locations are, letting them know that we know you will try to do these things, but your job as a person and a citizen, that it's their, your taxpayer dollars are being paid to them as a salary, is to make sure that they are prepared. And just to also be frank, is just like holding them responsible is going to be an ongoing thing. They can say something now and then also know it's 6 months before the next election. It's our job to really be in the conversations, or it's our job to be in the conversation and to hold them accountable. So also checking in before the elections, letting them know you do want to vote in person. But also another tactic is to vote by mail. And voting by mail is becoming more and more increasingly important in this next election, because we do not want people choosing between their health and getting out to vote. So with that, look into your vote by mail practices and look into the ways that you could hold your Secretary of State's office accountable. It's going to be really more important than ever.
Thank you for that answer, Priestley. We appreciate that. So we have to continue to follow up, and it can't be just one and done. So thank you for that. So another question along those same lines, one of the attendees has said, I sent for an absentee ballot for the primary. I never received a ballot. Can I expect the same in November?
November is, it is one of the most important elections ever. And so with this absentee ballot, I that's just terrible, because I know that's the story of so many people across the nation. My thing is do the thing that you know is going to work the best as possible. If you're when you are applying for an absentee ballot, also be aware of your state's rules. Many states have the rule that you need a proper excuse in order to request an absentee ballot. So maybe I'm not sure about your state's rules specifically, and I just don't know that off the top of my head. So maybe looking into that, maybe that was a factor in why you weren't sent it. But also think about another plan on how to vote for November. Maybe that is not the best way to get your vote and your voice heard. So I just would say, do whatever is possible. I know so many people now, they're like, you know what, I'm just gonna wake up as early as possible, and if I need to be in that line all day, I will. I'm gonna just save my sick day, it'll be fine. Even all of these things are terrible that we have to go through, but the whole point is that we want to be able to elect a new wave of people in, or we want to elect the people that reflect our voices in order to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future. And this is something we should be holding our officials accountable for.
Thank you. And so I would just say, from my own personal experience here in Indianapolis, Indiana, Marion County, I did submit a request for absentee ballot. I did not receive it, and then I followed up. So unfortunately, I think a lot of our municipalities don't necessarily have the people power to deal with the deluge of requests. And so we are going to have to start early. We are going to have to follow up. And then here in Indianapolis, we do have vote centers. So you can vote anywhere in the city. If it's closer for you to go to a vote center close to your work or your home, you can go to either one you want. And we also should utilize early voting. So I think it's not just one answer. It's a myriad of things that we can do to increase that.
Yeah, and Michelle, that was a great point about early voting, because early voting is really going to help, especially if you don't have the time to stand in line for 7 hours, which may be what it looks like in November. Why would they do that? Why would they do this? And it's something that you just have to think about and internalize, is to say, like, why would people try to suppress your vote? Because your vote matters. And we know from the beginning of time, when we were Black people and people of color were able to get the right to vote, we voted at droves, and it scared them, and it was like, what, they came up with literacy tests and fines and all of these things in order to make sure that your voice was not heard. And it's so important that you realize that when people are moving in a certain way to keep you from something, it should drive you a little bit harder. And I know I'm preaching to the choir, because you guys are already in it, but like it should drive you harder to make sure that no matter what, your vote is counted.
Thank you. So we have another question in the Q&A, and this might not necessarily be something that you can answer, but we're going to put that out and go from there. So Crystal is saying, I've seen that some groups in other states are planning to support voters with things like water and snacks. Is there an effort like that planned for the Indianapolis area that we can support?
Yeah, so One Meal Vote has a program called Vote Together. It's about making voting celebratory, fun, and accessible. So that's a program that you can get involved in. However, voting has changed. Like when COVID-19 happened, we were like, no one's gonna leave the house. Like we were thinking that like no one would want to risk their health in order to go out and vote. But what we saw was that, especially with the recent uprising and struggle for racial equity, I think that more people are more inclined to actually leave their house to go vote. And so it's just a shifting in strategies that is happening right now, so that we can prepare for both ends of the spectrum, for all ends of incoming. We need to be able to balance all of it. So yeah, I'm with you, Crystal.
Thank you so much. And another thing I would say to piggyback off of that is that it's a great idea to reach out to organizations that are already doing that work. So the NAACP is doing that work. The Urban League is doing that work. Many other fraternal organizations are going to be doing that work. So go ahead and band together with organizations that are already existing and try to support things that they are doing.
Another great thing I saw in Georgia was that they were there with like lawn chairs for people that were elderly. There's a lot of great things that are happening, and it's so great that you want to be a part of it.
Thank you. So we have another question. This question is from Serena. What can we do in Indiana to enact a process to track the processing of your mail-in vote, like in states like Colorado?
Yeah, so mail-in voting, voting by mail, is a new concept for many of the American people, and it is also a new concept for a lot of states having this incoming at such a mass level. And as Nichelle said, it's something that not a lot of states have the infrastructure for. So it's about really like holding them accountable. Like, are you guys hiring people to be counting these vote by mail before ballots? Because before it would be like a few hundred, and now it could darn well be half of the population voting by mail this year. So it's really about a question of infrastructure and holding them accountable. There's no processes or tracking systems right now. However, we're working with a few companies, a few organizations that that are advocating for a vote by mail across the nation and the accountability of it. So hopefully with all of their work and our work in combination, but also your personal work to make sure that we're holding your state accountable, we'll be able to accomplish that. But again, it's not something I would bank on having. You just got to do a bit more work this year, and hopefully that work. I want people to be like, Black people are tenacious. They're not gonna let it fall by the wayside, and it's really gonna be our job to make sure that that is the storyline.
Thank you. And I also put in the chat, Priestley, that in Indiana, you can go to the voting portal and you can check the status of your mail-in ballot. So I was able to do that to make sure that that was received. So there is a way for people to do that.
Great.
And so we have another question. Pardon me. Is there any serious movement nationally to make election days federal holidays to allow as many people as possible to vote?
I appreciate the question. There are movements happening around the election. So I would say there's a few dates in mind that are coming my way, and then I'll talk about, I want us to be realistic. I don't want to sell you guys a dream. So there's a few movements. National Voter Registration Day, that's in September. That's going to be a really big day to make sure that more people are registered to vote. Keep your eye on it. I believe it's like September 22nd, maybe. When it comes to September 22nd or 23rd, when it comes to Early Vote Day. Early Vote Day is going to be in October. MTV is like running this entire campaign to make sure more people are aware of Early Vote Day and know that they can vote early and know that they can vote early in their state. So that's going to be a major, major, major day of action to make sure more people have that. But when it comes to actually making Election Day a federal holiday, why would they do that if they don't want us to vote? And that's just the reality of it. This is voter suppression at its finest. It is saying that you need to sacrifice something, whether your health, your time, your job, in order for you to vote. And this is what we should be holding the people that we do elect, that do represent us in Congress, to have representation for. We need to hold them accountable. And we need to tell them that this is what we want. So I don't know anyone right off the top of my head that are doing like a national campaign for this, but I do want to say that, like, that is what we should have, and I agree with you. But unfortunately, it would be too much of a service for them to offer us that.
Thank you for that answer, Priestley. And what I would add to that is that we have to be the change that we want to see in the world. So if we think that this is something that's important, then we have to start that ball rolling. And so
Yep.
we have to start with our local officials, our state officials, and then our federal officials. We've elected them and they work for us. And so we have to tell them what we want and what we need, and we have to do it more than once. So I would say if you think that that's something that's important, that you should push for that. Also, I would encourage you to push for that with your own individual companies. That's a way to make a change as well. So a lot of times people will have a floating holiday, and perhaps you can use that with the voting day. So that's a great question.
Yeah.
So I think that those are all of the questions that we have for today. And what I will do is to let you mention anything else that we might have missed or that you think is important. And we're so excited about the work that you all are doing with When We All Vote.
Yeah, I just want to say I appreciate all of your questions. Thank you again to Nichelle and the entire team for having me. It's really, truly a blessing, and it's so great to know that, you know, wherever people are, they feel as though their voices are heard. And it's so I would just want to leave you guys with one word of inspiration, which is even if you know, tell a friend, because and hold the people around you accountable as well, because a lot of the times, whether it's just you or whether it's you or your family or your boyfriend or your girlfriend, and you're voting, sometimes the people around you are not voting either. So it's your job to use the relationships that you already have fostered and the factor of trust in those relationships to make sure that more people are registered to vote. Um, More people are registered to vote during this election. Go with them, make it a thing, make it fun, make sure that they're registered. But it's your job, because you're on here, almost 100 of you on this call. It is your job to make sure that yourselves are ready, and then the people that look like you, that reflect the same values of you, are registered and ready to vote. So with that, if you guys want more information about ways to get involved, become a voting squad captain, get registered, go to our website, whenweallvote.org. I know we dropped it into the chat a few times, but please, please, please go to our website and get involved. We're going to be doing a lot of stuff, and we're going to count on your support. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Priestley. I think that was probably the most important thing that you said for our entire session, is that use your power. And so if one person can reach out to 5 people and get them to vote, we can really get an avalanche started. And so we really appreciate you spending your time with us today. And thank you so much. And we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you.
All right. Hello, everybody. I don't know if I'm getting much a wave or anything, but my name is Mr. Saunders, Green-Eyed Bandit, and I'm just happy to be a part of this occasion today. Nowhere that we can run where you won't see grief or pain and this, that, and other, but I'm really grateful for this opportunity for you all to come together as leaders and members of the community to stay steadfast and forward moving. I'm honored to be the MC for this small segment of opportunity to tell, how you feel. And we have some phenomenal artists that would like to share some of their works today. And we don't have that much time, but I tell you, the poetry that you're about to hear is going to last a lifetime. And so with that being said, one of the things I would like to do is introduce and bring on our first poet. I hope she's on here, Miss Allison Horton. Are you on? Okay. Okay. Gabby Black. Gabby Black is also going to be representing today. And if you are ready, Gabby, go ahead and turn your video off and go ahead and share what you got.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Gabby Black. I am currently a rising senior at Brownsburg High School, and the poem I wrote just came out of a conversation with a friend and I, about our experience being high schoolers. And while all of this is kind of a trend for some people, at the end of the day, are they going to feel the same way about me when this is over? I don't really have a title for my poem yet, so if you'd like to suggest something, suggest it, but I'll get started. As these days of our lives that will turn into weeks that form a month become history, like every day of our lives, we interact and befriend people from different paths. These people may be our classmates, friends, neighbors, coworkers, people we meet in the grocery store line. We learn together, eat lunch with each other, send memes, and even sleep at each other's houses. We grow to appreciate one another and cherish our friendships until we are faced with reality. But when the day comes that my life as a Black person is threatened and is the center of your attention, you no longer know my name. You no longer speak to me about how my day was and what my weekend looks like. You no longer see me as me. Even when you say, I don't see color, well, then you don't see me. It won't matter when weeks from now, when the news replays the tweets of our nation's leader or the statements of police departments. What matters is how the platform we used to share, a platform that holds our best memories of us hand in hand, cheek to cheek, is silent. You can repost your friend's selfie, but not my brothers and sisters who suffer. Weeks from now, I will remember your stance when things simmer down. I will remember how we were once so close. I walk down the hall and you may look at me, but you don't see me. I buy our favorite ice cream at the store and it leaves a bitter taste in my mouth. We drift apart only because my skin has become an inconvenience to you in our sweet utopia that once was. Because weeks from now, I'll remember not what you said, but what you didn't. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Gabby. We really appreciate that. We're so excited to have young and up-and-coming poets to be able to participate with us today. And your piece resonated with me. I read it about a week ago online. Your mother shared it, and it really spoke to what we're dealing with right now. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day and sharing with us. We're expecting great things from you. We're excited about you being a rising senior, and we want you to keep us posted on the things that you're doing so that we can support you.
Thank you.
Next, we are going to have Mr. Adrian Matika, who is the former Indiana State Poet Laureate. He is an author and a great friend of the CBLC and a dear friend of mine. I so appreciate all his support, and we are going to let him come in his own way. Thank you.
Peace, everybody. Gabby, that was an amazing poem. Thank you for sharing that with us. And thank you, Nichelle, for making this space for art and discourse, because we are at we're in a crossroads. It always feels that way, but especially now. We need to vote, we need to march, and we need poems all at once. I'm just gonna read two poems really quickly, and they're both from my new book. It'll be out next summer. It's called Somebody Else Stole the World. And both the poems have the same title. I just wrote them, so nobody's heard any of these. Somebody else sold the world. And before I knew it, the violet sky flagged with the sun's violet demands for magnolias in bloom, for natural light, any place without a lock or a door, different kinds of masks for being and breathing, police with hearts instead of triggers, no police at all. The antagonists with their vanity tan said the usual about liberties and about wars while we buttoned up in our confinement and dreamed about hugging. We talked about what was and what will be, and George Floyd was kneed to his last breath, while the antagonists got more frantic and sent their cops to protect the neighborhoods of bright windows and white napkined eateries. We marched while we missed our friends. We sat while we missed dentist appointments. The police served gas and nightsticks to everybody around the monuments. Molars fell out without breathable air, and hair forgot its natural color without the testimony of breezy intersections and barbecues with family. Words lost their family recipes. Friends lost their words and lost their parents. A few still found love in the gerrymandered grocery lines and the farmers' fields tilled by their own untouchable vegetables. We marched and we sat and we marched, and the antagonists were in every corner of the ensuing curfew, fabricating secrets and armed to the teeth. Phones blinked where their ears should have been, while the air around us was so ripe, it might have broken in half if we could touch it. I wrote that after being in the circle with these brilliant protesters and advocates trying to be heard last week. Okay, and this is the other poem I was going to read. Somebody else sold the world. When I was a kid, I watched Poltergeist on a Tuesday, and it scared me so much I was afraid of the weekday itself. Nobody can comfort me on Tuesday. The long-fingered tree outside of my head is missing some bark. Antagonists all over the place, mostly maskless as unprepared burglars. You know how these folks be. They cough without covering their tracks. They leave their shoddy fingerprints everywhere. Instead of mixing yellow and yesterday for a new impossibility, they equip their own nondescript hearts again and again until they resurrect inside the TV's particled white. It will be weeks before anyone cares enough to change their channel. And in my imagination, spring snow, the last unfulfilled antagonist, that one in the White House, is in quarantine and he feels just like a black man for a minute. Everyone crosses the street as soon as he gets near. His pockets are turned out to their white parts, but everyone still thinks he sold the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Adrian. We really appreciate that. We're very excited about your upcoming books, and we can't wait to hear more about that. And hopefully we can have an event at the CBLC when that time comes. So next, we are going to have Mr. Eric Saunders share a piece with us.
I come from a town where the grass is brown and the trees fall down on their own. Stoplights don't work, some police are jerks, and the walls are crumbling down. This poem pertains to privilege, wealth, birthright, hope, vision in spite of hardships in life, eyesight, insight, foresight, the darkness of the womb for which light pierced night. You see, the moment you first forgot was the first breath of air consumed, beginning in a hospital delivery room, alley, street, or restroom. Babies born within the womb, buried within a tube for a tomb. Babies born high, first cry be the first hello and goodbye to a life gone too soon. And those born as joy in the morning and make it to the afternoon have been held this life for breath equivalent to a silver spoon. Sounds a lot like you. You may have been scarred or hurt so deep beneath, but the fact that you can breathe is the first tool you need to develop a dream to reach. Barriers are possible to breach. Whether your silver spoons have been tarred and tickled by the teeth of hate and hopelessness, seeking effortlessly to this world, woe is me, claiming that there is no opportunity. Well, in the midst of opposition, there was always opportunity. Life itself is bittersweet, but for those there are no immunity, like those that have dived in the decadence of their own disaster, now decorated in death. Yeah, so how you supposed to breathe with no air? And so the fact that the fight for breath in the beginning gives us the capability to even take a pitch at potential. So hit the ball out of the park with the essential parts of your hearts, because circumstance will dance always like weeds and weed in the ghetto. Silver spoons sit on top of tongues, letting the breath flow. Yes, generations of their minds lose their minds and let go after growing and gravitating to the perceptions of what they've been born to. But this is not a poem to justify anything that evil has placed itself its hands on, but of the fields of possibilities that broken folks have fought to dance on. Life is circumstance, born of circumstance, and we got born between the mix that got mixed. Equipped with skin and breath to leave this world better fixed before we got here. But there are minds in this time that are not here complaining and whining how hard it is to stay alive, while you got children all over this world rummaging through garbage just to survive, and that's if they're lucky or if they're able. Please connect to this poem like cable. I speak freely tonight. And I declare that life is a privilege and not a right. And silver spoons are not the term coined for the wealthy, but a sign that we're all born of wealth itself. Life is the place where you learn to help yourself, but gratitude becomes an attitude lost in the shells. And silver spoons have been tarred and tossed in hell, shining on murdered, pregnant Sudan mothers tossed in wells. And we can't help these young bamboozle dudes entertaining for sales. These young prostituted young ladies with no profit in the sex sales and sales. These kids limited to project metal bars. Institutionalized to 3 concrete walls and bars, only respond to when to eat and sleep. And TV don't help these kids locate where their true vision is. Y'all, we weren't created to fail. Created like shiny silver spoons and made to excel, adapt, adjust, assimilate. But doing what's hard and right has been the opponent in this life for which we fight. Environments dictate fates of generations. Doing wrong becomes right, and doing right becomes wrong. And in the end, you singing the same old song, affiliated to I can't, with tons of excuses. And so I don't know your situations or complications, but I assure you would not sit here to be useless. Be grateful for your breath. Take more time to breathe deeply outside of a doctor's request. Run this land with silver spoon in hand and make change happen. Quit frowning so much and start laughing, because I've been asking, and I mean literally asking those dead in cemeteries, and they say, love hard, live fearlessly, seek joy with each breath you got left. Inhale, exhale, and make this life your only shot at life, worth your while. That's that piece, y'all. Thank you.
Eric, thank you so much. As you all may be aware and notice, Eric right now is in a cemetery, and he just laid to rest one of his dear friends. And so we thank him for the work that he's doing in the community. We thank him for still supporting our event, even in the midst of his sorrow. So we just send love and prayers to you, Eric, and we appreciate everything you're doing, and keep pressing on. We need you.
Thank you, Nichelle, and I thank you for being a testament to our tenacity, a testament to our perseverance. You know, I always feel like poetry is metaphysical, and it tells the testimony of the living. And, you know, even being in this space right now is no coincidence. A lot of times people think us poets are just trying to say something. Like, no, we come straight from the heart, and that's what we have to be. And yeah, here we are. This is the reality of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we are going to have Allison Horton, a local poet and an author of Quickfire, and she is going to come in her own way.
Making our collective breaths count, 101. Truth be told, it is not simply your one vote or my one vote that matters. It is the impact of our collective votes rising from the informed masses that matters. One distinctive, unapologetically, say it loud, I'm Black and I'm proud, body of votes that matter. Black as a new national anthem, one that lifts every voice and proclaims our lives are not somebody else's for the taking. Black is the one color that has yet to melt in the pot. For Black neither melts nor cracks, no matter how our political parties have been split in two. Fact is, this is America, the country that repeats its history to remind you of what you can and Republic cannot do in your Black skin for 8 minutes and 46 seconds. I don't know about you, but for 8 minutes and 46 seconds, I saw an America whose Black votes matter more than any election year prior. I saw us go from we shall overcome to come over here and put out this fire. Yes, Baldwin warned it would be the fire next time. Who knew it would be next, timed? Dear protesters, your one vote is an awakening cocktail. For those of you who didn't take to the streets for whatever reason, not your generation, not your season, been there, done that, we understand. Just know without a doubt what you also hold in your hand. I got one, you got one, Brianna, Ahmad, and Georges were taken. So come November 3rd, our challenge will be to help undo, cast one Black vote, pick between the two lesser evils if that's how you decide to do the math. Just be sure to carry the one over in the before and aftermath of the last few months, 3.6 years, 4 centuries, and if indeed Black lives matter across transatlantic degrees, 2 plus 2 will clearly equal who you are for. See, it's the ballot or the bullet, by any means necessary. As far as I'm concerned, there are no pretty gray areas around Election Day or any day in between. Neutrality is whose reality? Living while Black, public housing while Black, tax paying while Black, school redistricting while Black, lobbying for better while Black. We all know shopping, bird watching, barbecuing, and jogging while Black runs the risk of provoking a citizen's arrest nationwide. At the beginning and end of the day, Black lives matter, making Black votes equally as important. So here's the skinny latte on the whole Starbucks of the matter. No choice is a choice in which you will have no choice in the matter. If we really run with Maud, Brianna, George, and Trayvon, then we are clear this leg of our struggle ain't just a jog, it's a marathon. One in which we got to pass bills and pass the baton, become Jesse Owens rounding that track in 1936, when another corrupt patriot sought to advance anti-human politics. I'm just saying your Black, brown, rainbow votes be a continuum of a much more powerful voice. Hashtag Black votes matter. Thank you.
Wow. Allison, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You just encompass so much of what we're going through right now. And that's why I thought it was so important for us to have this poetry segment, because not only is it going to galvanize us and encourage us to move forward, it's also a balm in Gilead. It's also helping us to deal with these difficult times. And so thank you for taking time out and to creating that piece for us. And so in the chat, and I'll say this to all of our poets, people are clamoring for those poems. So people would like those in written form. So we'll talk to you guys later about if that's possible or not. But just know for all of the poets, people were so moved about what you shared. And so we thank you so much for the work that you're doing. Art is important, poets are important, and creatives are important. So we need you now more than any time at all. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
So we're going to have a quick, about 30-second intermission, and then we are going to have our segment about self-care. So just hold on one moment. And now we are going to have Lauren Freeman, an NDPL staff member. She's going to moderate our session with Bianca Harris, who is a local therapist. And Lauren, go ahead and take it away.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for attending. We are very, very appreciative of everyone that has decided to join us to talk about this very timely and very important topic. I am here to introduce Bianca Harris. She is a mental health provider with over 12 years experience in various aspects of mental health care. We felt that it was really important to talk about self-care during this very tough and intense time. So Bianca, if you could go ahead and let us know what you have for us.
Hi. Hello, everybody. So glad to be here, Lauren. Thank you, Nichelle. Thank you for this. This is an awesome thing. So I'm just going to take a couple minutes to kind of talk about what does self-care look like in the midst of all that is going on in the world, because not only do we have grief and struggle happening in the world, but we also have to deal with everyday life. And everyday life in and of itself can be very overwhelming and very frustrating, and it can feel like things are bigger than what we can handle. So what I'm going to offer is just a couple of things that we can do, or that you can do anywhere. So you can do it in the car, preferably not while you're driving. You can do it if you have to go to work, if you're at home, if you're just overwhelmed, okay? So we want to talk about self-care. And so we're going to find some calm, some semblance of peace in the midst of these storms that we have, okay? So when we're talking about self-care, we have to remember to be intentional, okay? So the New Oxford American Dictionary states that being intentional means being done with purpose and deliberate, which means this is not something that we're going to do haphazardly. This is not something that we're going to do, oh, hey, by the way, I got a quick 5 minutes, let me, run and do this. It's planned, it's intentional, and it's on purpose, okay? When we talk about self-care, it is easy to push us to the back burner because we have other things that are more important. But the reality is if we cannot take care of ourselves, then we cannot take care of these other things, okay? We schedule meetings, we schedule doctor's appointments, we schedule friend girl meetings, we schedule everything but time for ourselves, okay? We're talking about being deliberate. So I want you to think about some ways in which, what does it mean to be intentional in your life? What are you intentional about? What do you intentionally do? What do you intentionally set up, okay? And when we think about being intentional, we also have intentional things that we do on a daily basis. All right. Oh yeah, look at that, y'all. We got this. So we talk about what does it mean to be intentional in our daily life? What is it that you do every day on purpose? Okay. When we talk about self-care, self-care needs to be one of those things that we schedule. So myself, I schedule 30 minutes a day where I have what I call mindless activity. Okay. What I mean by that is it is not time where I use to spend doing something else, whether it be something for the family, whether it be something for work, whether it be something for somebody, but strictly just for me. So sometimes that requires going to the gym. Sometimes that reminds taking a nap. Sometimes it's watching a show, but I am being intentional in my daily life. So what does your daily life look like? Being intentional helps to reduce cortisol and increase endorphins in our system. What that means is when we have an excess of cortisol in our system, okay, cortisol is a chemical that's exuded that is meant to have a quick response to a situation. It's kind of like adrenaline, okay? When it's meant to be in short spurts, but when we continue to be overwhelmed and we continue to worry and we continue to stress, what happens is the body continues to release cortisol because it thinks it needs to move quickly, it thinks it's under attack, and it needs to shift. When we have too much cortisol in our system for too long, it deposits on joints, it deposits in our necks, in our backs, and we have all these aches and pains that are unexplained and that are not helped by aspirin and ibuprofen, okay? It's held by stress, okay? Ooh. So on our next slide, we talk about ways in which we can be mindful, okay? Remember, being intentional. Mindfulness helps us to realign and center ourselves, okay? So when we talk about being mindful and being intentional, right? This is when we're focusing on what is going on internally, okay? Not how the environment is directly affecting us, but what is going on internally. What are we experiencing? How are we experiencing what's going on in our environment, our immediate environment? So how do we be mindful? So glad y'all asked. What we do is we sit up straight, okay? So you get in a comfortable chair, couch, something that has a good back. Have your back straight, your feet flat on the floor, and your hands either folded in your laps or on your knees. What this does is create a relaxed state physically for our bodies. And again, it's beginning to tell our system that we are relaxed so we can stop pumping cortisol in. We close our eyes and breathe in normally. We sit there for about 2 minutes, just quiet, not saying anything, and experiencing what is going on around us. What do you feel? What do you physically touch? What does your skin feel like? Is it cold? Is it hot? Is it uncomfortable? Is the chair soft? Is it hard? Then we talk about what is it that we hear, okay? Being privy to the sounds. If you're at home, do you hear the hum of the refrigerator? Do you hear the furnace or the air conditioning cutting on and off? If you have children, do you hear them screaming in the room next door? What do you hear going on around you? And then take a moment to see where is your mind going? What are you thinking about? Are you thinking about when is this 2 minutes going to be up? What do you have to do next? What your grocery list is going to be? What errands you have to run? Or are you sitting and thinking about how do you feel? Are we happy? Are we sad? Are we hurt? Are we vulnerable? So take a minute to think about what we're thinking, and then what is going on around you. Is it quiet? Is it chaotic? And with what's going on around you, how is that directly impacting you? When we talk about being mindful means being aware of what the environment is around us and how we have an internal self-assessment, okay? What it also does, it helps to control our breathing. And when we control our breathing, we bring the cortisol levels down. Okay? The next thing we can do is what we call square breathing, okay? Square breathing is a simple tactic, a simple skill that we can use anywhere. Square breathing is about intentional, mindful breathing that allows us to oxygenate our muscles and stimulate blood flow. When we're stimulating the blood flow and we have oxygen in our system, we are now pulling cortisol out, okay? Because now we are not stressed and hypervigilant in one area. We have a free-flowing circulatory system. It helps to reduce stress, anxiety, and frustration. And it also helps us to release some of that tension when we're feeling tired and overwhelmed. Now, this is not a replacement for sleep. Sleep is very important. How do we practice square breathing, okay? Well, a square has 4 points, right? So we're gonna have 4 points to our breathing. We wanna sit in our mindful position, feet flat on the floor, back straight, hands in our laps, okay? We're gonna breathe in through our nose for the count of 4. So we're gonna breathe in, filling our lungs with oxygen. We're gonna hold our breath while counting to 4 in our mind. Then we're gonna exhale slowly through our mouth for the count of 4. We're gonna repeat this cycle 4 times. When we're inhaling, if we are getting a good lung inhale, your stomach should actually extend. So if you are breathing and you wanna know if you're breathing correctly, if you're going about this the right way, you can place your hand on just above your belly button. And when you breathe in, you should feel your arm and your hand extend because your belly is extending. You hold that breath for 4 seconds. And then you exhale through your mouth for 4 seconds. As you exhale, your hand should retract and your stomach should be back to where it normally sits. We do this 4 times. I encourage my clients to do square breathing anywhere from 3 to 5 times a day intentionally. Okay, when we wake up in the morning, when sometime midday, and then right before you go to bed at minimum. This is also a good time to do it in times of quick stress. Doing it 4 times, you can do this in a matter of less than a minute. Okay, so it's not a big time consuming thing. You sit for 2 minutes and be mindful about your surroundings and do your square breathing for 1 minute, and you've reduced your stress levels in a matter of 3 minutes. Okay, so how do we plan ourselves first? It's as simple as 1, 2, 3. We have some basic steps that we follow in order to make sure that we're being intentional about our self-care. 1, consistency is key. The more we do it, the more we're going to see reduce in stress and just overall feeling better. 1, schedule 30 minutes at minimum of self-care daily. You can do more than that, and I encourage more than that if you have the time, but at least 30 minutes daily. Practice your mindfulness and breathing every day. Okay, it's 3 minutes. 3 minutes out of a 24-hour day period. Okay. Number 3, get some sleep. Okay, we as adults, college students, high school students, we kind of say, oh, I only need 4 or 5 hours of sleep. And what happens is the less sleep that we have, the brain will start to shut down certain body functions in order to preserve energy, because the body thinks it's under attack. So that shows an increased stress, increased cortisol, and increased weight gain. So at minimum 7 to 9 hours daily. So if you know you got to be up at 5 a.m., we set that alarm. We're going to be in bed by 10 or 9. Okay. So practice these things daily, and it helps to reduce stress. It helps to reduce anxiety. It does not fix the problem, but what it does, it helps us have more mental clarity in order to be able to continue and fight the good fight. Okay. If you have any questions or comments, you can contact me. My name is Bianca Harris. I'm the founder of the Phoenix Nicholas Center. You can give me a call, text, shoot me an email, or check out our website. Okay. If you have any questions or comments, please let me know, or you can contact me later.
Okay, Lauren, you can go ahead and take it away.
Okay, so I know we're running a little bit behind, and I don't see any questions from anyone, but I would like to know what during this tense and sometimes depressing time that we are living in addition the pandemic, and we have the Black Lives Matter movement, what is the top thing that you would say that Black people should do to take care of their mental health?
Go to therapy. And I say that not because I'm a therapist, but I say that because historically Black people have experienced traumas that other races have and cultures have not experienced in the same way. There is a study that shows that there is a genetic mutation between African Americans in the United States and other Black people around the world. And that's because at no point in time in this country have Black people ever had safe space. So we're not okay in a lot of ways, but we know how to maintain. So 1, practice your self-care, put you first. Secondly, get out, find a provider, find a clinician, find somebody who looks like you, and there's a lot of us here in the city, and start to have those conversations. It's okay not to be okay, and it's okay to talk to somebody as an arbitrary third party to talk about how we feel and what we think. Take care of yourself, put yourself first, doing your self-care, find you a therapist.
All right, thank you so very much for your suggestions, and I hope all of us take that to heart. And there is no stigma being in therapy, so I want us to be better about that as Black people for sure.
Absolutely.
Nichelle?
Yeah, we have one more question that's in the chat, and I'll go ahead and pose that. to Ms. Harris. I just want to say that the tips that you gave us were so helpful. I appreciate that. I'm going to be printing those out and putting them all over my house so I can continue to remember them and make sure that I make them happen. So someone in the chat is saying, my mood changes so quickly. I feel like I have to watch, and I think what they're saying is the news, so that I can be involved and informed. But it causes me anxiety and depression. I've tried not watching, but I'm compelled. Tips for how to manage these shifting moods.
So the first thing we have to do is to, one, be intentional about what it is that we watch. Set yourself a time limit, because right now we are living in a time where there's so much information that we are inundated. So moods shift based upon what we see and what we are doing. So it's important to be informed, but set yourself a schedule. So if you check news feeds on your phone, if you're watching the news, set a time limit. Okay, so I'm going to have 15 minutes in the morning, and I'm going to have 15 minutes in the evening, and then I'm shutting off the news, because the reality is that the news is ever evolving and ever changing. And so if we don't find that break in between staying informed and taking care of ourselves, we're going to increase the cortisol in our system. And what's going to happen is it's going to make us physically sick. If we don't deal with stress and manage stress, it makes us physically sick. So if you feel the need and compelled to be involved and understand what's going on, find a couple of trusted news outlets that you tend to watch or you tend to go to normally, and set yourself a time limit. So for example, if you get your news from Twitter, put a time limit on the Twitter app. I have 30 minutes to check these different feeds, and then I'm cutting it off for the day. Because guess what? The news is going to be back there the next day. Okay? Put yourself first. Create time limits to create stimulus breaks.
Wow, thank you so much. And that's why you're the therapist, and that's why we had you to be on our program today. We're so glad that Lauren Freeman suggested that you speak with us. These tips are so important, because what I want people to remember is that this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. We've got to be in it for the long haul. There's a lot of stressors out there. And so we've got to get ourselves healthy and prepare ourselves so we can get the best selves we can possibly be. So thank you so much, Ms. Harris. We appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And next up, we are going to have our panel discussion, Social Action in the Age of Coronavirus. We have several amazing panelists, and we're going to let each one of those panelists introduce themselves. So we're going to have Denise Abdul-Rahman, Leon Bates, Jessica Chapman, Reverend Shonda Nicole Gladden, and Dr. Jerome Reed. And before we get started, we just want everyone to know that what we're talking about today are tips that you can use in order to make a change in your community. And so social action is individual or group behavior that involves interaction with other individuals or groups, especially organized action towards social reform. And so what you see right now with people marching and even going on social media, they are exercising their power to make a change in things that they think are unjust. Mm-hmm. And so there are 4 models of social action. We have constructive thinking, mobilization, organization, and action. Those are all essential ingredients to the model. So social action in the US goes as far back as the Boston Tea Party. And what we're going to let each panelist today is talk about the work that they've done and how the coronavirus and the quarantine has changed their work, or maybe it hasn't. And so we're going to let each panelist introduce themselves and tell us about the work that they're doing. And so we're going to start with Denise.
Thank you so much, Nichelle, and thank you for your leadership of the Center for Black Literature and Culture. I'm just going to start out with saying that I am a daughter of many freedom fighters. My mother was a women's rights activist. She went to Beijing, China, and she taught self-care there to many of the women there. Chinese women were being oppressed during the time of Hillary Rodham Clinton, and she taught to HBCUs. My father was a Black Panther in Lafayette, Indiana, and attended Mayor Hatchard's Black Political Convention in the 70s. My big mama marched for Jobs for Justice, and my great grandmother Lola housed Pullman porters. So I am a daughter of many freedom fighters that have gone by and survived the transatlantic Middle Passage, endured the Holocaust of African descendants enslaved, and made it through the Jim Crow, and now dealing with his brother James Crow, sending our Black and brown folks through to the school to prison pipeline, calculating and adding the profits to be made off the people via the mass incarceration system, and dying at the hands and knees of police and hate crime abuses. Emmett Till, Sean Reed, Michael Taylor, Aaron Bailey, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, saying their names and recognizing the list of infinite, that this list is infinite. Many of us feeling terrorized, and we are still managing to thrive in spite of the lack of adequate investments and the lack of system change in our communities, change that would support the enhancement of the quality of our lives. We are still rising, and we have not succumbed, even in the midst of a pandemic and our inability to breathe. And still we are solidified that indeed our Black lives matter. I am the regional field organizer with the National NAACP for our Environmental Climate Justice Program. I'm serving the Midwest and the Plain States. I have an MBA in healthcare management and a body of work of environmental climate justice work that spans over 8 years. Our organization is the oldest and starkly effective civil rights organization. At the helm of the leadership is Derek Johnson, our president and CEO. And our program's leadership is Senior National Director Jacqueline Patterson. And I thank you for this invitation to discuss social action.
Thank you. And next, we're going to have Leon Bates.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I born and raised here in Indianapolis, and I guess you'd say I'm an urban historian, and I focus on violence, police violence, and the intersection of race. And I also have worked alongside Denise and some others with environmental justice issues here in Indianapolis. It has been a long struggle. The other day I was looking at some old newspaper articles, and I didn't realize I got started in this in the 1990s. So you're going to be in it for the long haul. It's not something that's going to happen overnight.
Okay. And next is Jessica Chapman.
Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for having me. So recently, before I devoted more of my time into studying for the LSAT, I was a recent graduate of the 2019 Next Gen NAACP Leadership Program. This is an amazing leadership program that's taught me so many ways to get involved in my community, as well as advocating for civil rights and, in our community, as well as intertwining the relationships between intergenerational individuals in the NAACP. I was also the NAACP Next Gen State Alumni Lead, where I was able to help my classmates along with alumni get more acclimated into serving the local branches in the state of Indiana, as well as completing the program, the Next Gen program. I have served as the Young Adult Committee Chair for my branch here in Indianapolis, the Greater Indianapolis branch, for a year and a half now. And in that role, I've been helping the young adults get more involved in supporting the NAACP 6 Game Changers, alongside helping the Youth and College Division get more acclimated with understanding the young adult committees around the state and how they can continue to get more involved. And lastly, I served as a chair for the Community Resource District council for my district, where we were in a position to help bridge the relationship between community and the police and come up with different ways to create a crime prevention / reduction project for our specific district. So I do thank you all for having me.
Thank you so much, Jessica. And next we're going to have Reverend Shonda Nicole Gladden with the Poor People's Campaign.
Yes, good afternoon. Thank you so much, Ms. Nichelle, for convening this and for hosting and having us here. As you said, I'm Reverend Shonda Nicole Gladden. I'm an itinerant elder in the African Methodist Episcopal Church. I serve a local church here in Indianapolis called Crossroads AME Church. But most importantly, today, I am here to represent the Poor People's Campaign. A lot of times people see me out front. I'm very visible, but I want to set the stage before we get into the conversation and say, though you see me, I bring the stories and the history of Patrick Sailing, our young adult leader up in Bloomington, who's been camping out in the tents for the last few weeks at the death of Black lives across our nation. I also bring the work of Reverend Kimberly Coxon Flory from up in Fort Wayne, Indiana, who's been doing the work on the ground for the immigrant and the Spanish-speaking population. I bring the work of Pastor Mick Finch from down south in Crawfordsville, Jeffersonville, Indiana, as well as my co-colleague in this vineyard, Brother Jeff Howell, who right here in Indianapolis, and several others. But I don't come as the head of the Poor People's Campaign in Indiana. I come to represent the stories and the voices of all of these people. Because in 1968, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Initiated a Poor People's Campaign by saying that uniting the poor and dispossessed people from across our nation is the way that we will upend the violations and those things that cause our country to not be united, but to rather be divided. So I'm just so elated and excited to be part of this panel and look forward to having conversations about where do we go from here. Thank you again for having me.
Thank you so much, Reverend Gladden. We appreciate that. We have an amazing panel here, and we are going to go ahead and jump right in. The first question that I'd like to throw out to the group is, do you see that in the age of coronavirus and in the age of quarantining that social activism has changed in any way? And I'm going to let Dr. Jerome Reed answer that question first.
Thank you very much. I believe that we have entered a new era where we've got to adapt our tactics and to make them suitable to the world that we live in. With COVID-19, we can't do everything the way we've done it before. Take phone banking, for example, to get the vote out and to help people register to vote and understand what they should be voting for. Normally, we would come together in one place and use actual physical phones to do phone banking. Well, the NAACP has adapted. We have a system now where we can do phone banking virtually through what's called the virtual phone bank through our voter activation network, or the VAN. That's one example of how we have managed to adapt and change what we do. And some of the even more traditional things like direct mail. We're all stuck in the house for the most part, unless we're going out to shop or to work very briefly. But we can sit home and do direct mail. We can take postcards, put stamps on them, get lists generated of people who are not registered to vote, or people who are registered and been missing out on elections. So those are just two of the examples of how we can adapt, adjust, and continue to press our agenda to make sure that everybody is able to cast a vote and have a voice in this society. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Reed. And I apologize, I did not give you an opportunity to introduce yourself. If you could do so now, I would really appreciate that. Charge that to my head, not my heart.
I'm Dr. Jerome Reed, Regional Field Director for the NAACP. I staff our units in Illinois, Indiana, Kentucky, Ohio, Michigan, West Virginia, and Wisconsin. My background, I'm a PhD in political science. I'm an attorney I've been working with the NAACP since about 1979. I just look young. And I am encouraged that we still are an effective organization. I'm encouraged that the civil rights movement has impacted people not only in this country, but all over the world. I was happy but in shock yesterday to see some 30 or 40,000 people protesting in Germany for George Floyd. And that says the advocacy that we've been doing since the NAACP's first Supreme Court case, which involved a man whose last name was Pink, who woke up and found some sheriffs in South Carolina walking around his house, and he defended himself and his family. That was one of the first cases that the NAACP fought all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court that involved police misconduct. And this is something that I hope we can address. I also hope that we learn from what President Obama's 21st Century Task Force on Policing has done, and that we can continue to have a voice and ultimately have community control of our own police departments. Thank you.
Thank you. So my next question is, what new methods have come to light based upon where we are right now? And so I'll let anyone who would like to accept that question to jump in. I think Denise is jumping in now.
Well, some of the new methods that we are using with our environmental climate justice program of the NAACP are, one, we're obviously all moving to virtual conversations, virtually organizing with our members. We employ a strategy framework that's called the Just Transition. And the Just Transition framework, which was created by the NAACP, the Climate Justice Alliance, and Movement Strategy, it's a frame that tells us, hey, let's push back on all of this extractive economy, everything that takes from our communities, and that we work to stop this bad and we begin to build the new to support a living economy for our communities. So we shift the economic control to communities. We democratize the wealth and workplace for our communities. We want to advance the ecological restoration, drive racial justice and social equity, relocalize most of the production and consumption, and begin to retain and restore our cultures and our traditions. And just one kind of example that we're doing across the nation, but specific models that I can lift up both in Illinois and Indiana and Iowa, is basically our conferences are beginning to build somewhat like resilience hubs or energy justice types of hubs, which will help folks to, we live in old housing stock, and during this pandemic, we've had moratoriums on our utilities, but yet the utility companies are trying to recoup their lost revenues at this time and increase our community's utility rates. So with the energy justice model speaks to energy democracy, people's right to have their own energy. Energy is a human right. Everyone has the right to be warm in the winter and cool in the summer. It's about creating a black to green pipeline where there's a whole new green economy that's coming forth. And we want to make sure that our underemployed, our unemployed, our youth, our formerly incarcerated or returning citizens are part of that black to green pipeline. So what we're doing is helping our communities to build. They're doing this climate resiliency work. There's climate resiliency work that they could be a part of. Unfortunately, there's disaster work that they can be doing to move equity and to include people into those jobs. We're having folks form different co-ops and urban gardens to work out food scarcities within our communities, and fighting against even our Indianapolis chapter, who's very instrumental in fighting for clean water within their schools that are lead-free. We need clean water, such as in Flint that was negatively impacted, and East Chicago in their soil. So we continue, even within the pandemic, to have these conversations, to organize, to strategize. And lastly, but not least, of course, voters can begin to look at whether their candidates are climate believers or climate deniers, whether or not they understand the importance of employing clean energy while our communities continue to breathe toxic pollution, such as in Michigan City, Indiana, where they're hosting a coal-fired power plant. What would it look like if they began to build clean energy, and they could create a whole voting campaign and strategy around that? So we're all about building and moving it, fighting against the bad and bringing the new. And we believe in community-centered decision-making, and that the people do have the answers for their own local communities. And we just want to collectively move alongside of our members and the communities that they serve.
Thank you. Would any of the other panelists like to answer that question as well?
Certainly. As you see, the background behind me says June 20, that as we have shifted due to the COVID-19, we've seen a series, if you will, of moments of heightened activity around the nation for which social action, social justice is necessary. But before this began, we had intended to convene upon Washington, D.C. on June 20th, 2020. At the wake of COVID-19, although we had been actively part of what we were calling the Do More Tour, where we were mobilizing, organizing, registering, and educating people across the country throughout 35 states, we had to shift that all to online. So a week from today, we are hosting the largest mass assembly of poor and dispossessed people and those who come alongside them to have what we're calling the Mass Poor People's Assembly and gathering. It will be virtual. And so you can sign up june2020.org to be part of this movement. After we have seen the moments, now we are trying to gather together for a movement to shift the moral narrative of our country.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to jump in there?
Sure, I'll take a shot at it. One way I look at this, and I thought about it when you first talked about this, Nichelle, with how we're going to protest in the time of COVID-19, is I thought about we know how to protest, and we know how to put our passion into protesting, but I think we need to also take it to the next level and need to start thinking about how to advocate and advocate effectively. And one of the things I think is key to advocating is to become informed or become better informed. And what I'm getting at, I'll make one quick point, is that quite often when we start talking about making change, is that someone is invariably going to say it's going to cost something or cost too much. And we get caught up with cost. And I have now developed the argument that we need to understand the difference between cost and price. It will cost us something, undoubtedly. But what we also need to focus on is what's the price we'll pay for not doing something. And we need to internalize that, understand it, and start to use that whenever we hear, especially in the public arena, and we hear politicians start talking about the cost, is to confront them with what's the price of not doing it. We know there's going to be a cost. I don't care what it is we do, there's going to be a cost involved. What we need to think about is what's the price for not doing the right thing.
Thank you. Jessica or Dr. Reed?
The NAACP is calling on the federal government to provide funds to states to improve election administration and update voting systems during COVID-19 to comply with the Center for Disease Control standards. So there are certain safety aspects that need to be put in place in terms of people going to vote on election day. We want to have minimum standards for all states to follow in terms of election administration in general to ensure that there is safe voter participation, extended early voting periods, vote by mail, such as one of the things that's available in Indiana. We also want to avoid the fiasco like just happened down in Georgia when people had to wait hours to cast a ballot. And this is part of a larger campaign that the NAACP has initiated called We Are Done Dying. And we are going to continue to press forward for voting rights in this country, for healthcare rights in this country, for education, for our children, for a smart and safe criminal justice policy that has equitable criminal justice system and stops warehousing Black people and mass incarceration of Black people. We're also looking for economic sustainability, and we also are involving and engaging our youth and young adults in the highest numbers possible.
Thank you. Our next question: what positives do you see on the horizon with the increased awareness of racial disparities? And I'll let Jessica start with that one.
Thank you, Nichelle. So I would say in light of COVID-19, I think one of the positives is that this country is starting to pay more attention to the disadvantages that have taken place for African Americans. And what I mean by that is, as we look at COVID-19, we're seeing that Black Americans are twice as likely more times to pass away from COVID-19 than our counterparts. And we're talking about individuals who have chronic diseases like diabetes, heart disease, asthma. And so I think that it's very important that individuals understand what racial disparities are, but also echoing what Dr. Reed was just mentioning, some of the 6 NAACP game changers, how we're also seeing that there are disparities in education. That's my hope, that more people are starting to see the disparities in how individuals are not provided opportunities to have equal economic success, as well as a disproportionate, individuals who are disproportionately incarcerated. So we can kind of go on down the list, but I think overall the positives are that individuals are being educated and informed that this is not just one system. There are many systems that play a part in racial disparities.
Thank you. Would someone else like to answer that question as well?
This is Denise. I can add that I think this, in the midst of this pandemic, has heightened the awareness of our need for system change. And as we talk about environmental climate justice, it's heightened how many of people of African descent are most impacted by COVID-19. Whether because they live near polluting systems such as coal-fired power plants or other fossil fuel industry, making their respiratory systems more keenly impacted by those pollutants, and therefore making them more negatively impacted by COVID-19. In addition to those that are the bus drivers, whether they're school buses or our city buses that continue to breathe those diesel fumed vehicles. If we begin, that makes their respiratory systems more vulnerable, making them more vulnerable to COVID-19. So as this COVID-19 has begun to really show the injustices and how vulnerable and how disproportionately impacted our communities are, it is shifting the narrative and making even various corporations more keenly aware of the inequities and their participation in this inequality. And so it's starting a conversation that will shift and begin to bend the arc more toward justice, and everything from moving our children off of diesel fueled buses and putting them on to electric vehicle buses so that their breathing is better, by everything from shutting down coal-fired power plants and building clean energy so that people's breathing and other parts of their health is better. And I'll stop there.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to weigh in on that before we go to the next question?
If I could throw one more thing in there.
Yes, William.
Someone brought up the police violence we've been experiencing the last few weeks, and young Mr. Reed from Indianapolis. I think it's really important in the show. You've heard me, harp on this before, but we don't understand how long this problem is going on. And I'll give you an example. In Indianapolis, most everyone knows the name of Michael Taylor and what happened to Michael Taylor here. And we may think that's a long time because that happened, I believe, in the 1990s. But we actually, I believe right now, research is showing that the first time a police officer, a white police officer, was actually taken to court for taking the life of an unarmed African-American was in Indianapolis in 1876. Now, these two white police officers were found not guilty. The thing about a trial is a different discussion, but my point is just how long this has been going on. We're talking about from the end of Reconstruction to today. This is not a new problem, but most of us don't realize how old of a problem it is. When we think about that, the end of Reconstruction, 1876, that's how long we have been dealing with white police officers shooting unarmed African Americans in this country. That is the oldest case I can find, and it happened right here in Indianapolis in March of 1876. Let me stop.
Leon, thank you for that historical perspective. Did anyone else want to weigh in on that?
I just wanted to co-sign on what Mr. Leon said. It's been 4 centuries, from 1619 until now, Black people throughout this country, we have been dying at the hands of those who have been placed over us in terms of authority figures. And so the 4 centuries, if you will, of systemic inequality, it's so deep and so embedded that we've had this modern day lynching of George Floyd that has shifted the country to all begin to address the systemic racism, the systemic inequities, that it's not only been long, but it's also been deep. So now we have to be hard in our collective action. We can't be separate entities. We're not an organization, we're an organism under which many of us will do the coalition building that's going to shift this from one moment to a real movement that we deal with the depth and the length of what we have gone through in this country.
Absolutely.
Thank you. And with that, piggyback on that, we got a question in the chat. And before I ask the question, we know in the last week or so, there's been a lot of talk about defunding the police, disbanding the police, and just so we can all be on the same page. When people are saying defunding, they're not saying to totally abolish tomorrow. Right. What they're saying is to reallocate those sources to organizations that can really help. Police cannot help with mental health issues. You shouldn't call the police when that's what you need help with. But when you don't have any other choice, oftentimes that's what happens. So when people are saying defunding, they're really saying reallocating those funds and restructuring. And so with that being said, what do you think about rehauling or overhauling the police force, and what would that look like?
If I may, Madam Moderator, the idea that we need to reform the police department in this country is not new. And just like we had a blueprint left by the Obama administration for how to deal with pandemics that was thrown out, there was a blueprint for 21st century policing that the Obama administration put together for us. And apparently it too was thrown out by this administration. So this is not like we have to reinvent the wheel. The homework has been done. We have blueprints, we have plans that we can implement. As a matter of fact, the body cameras are one of the things that came out of the Obama administration task force for 21st century policing. And it has helped in many cases. It's not a total answer to everything, but it is one of the concrete reforms that came out of it. One of the things that was used effectively was consent decrees when police departments were having a pattern and practice of inappropriate police behavior, such as in Chicago and Baltimore and other cities. Those consent decrees were pretty much thrown out by William Sessions when he was Attorney General under this administration. So we have ways of reforming police departments already lined up. We have it documented, we have it detailed, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel again. So I'm hoping that we can seize this momentum and also to support what the Congressional Black Caucus has introduced in the legislature in terms of reforming police departments now. But this is not new, and we've already done the homework. We already have the plans.
Would anyone else like to weigh in on that before we go to our
Yeah,
next
if I could, to slightly disagree, and I only say slightly because I think what needs to happen, and he's correct. We have done that kind of homework. We have actually, when I say we, I mean in the United States, we have looked at what's happened after every one of these major flare-ups, racial flare-ups in this country since the 1870s. We know what the problem is, and we know what it's going to take to fix it. But I would say, I think there is a disagreement with some people about what reform means and what it would mean to actually replace the police that we understand today with something different. So a lot of people, and I tend to be one of them anymore, don't believe you can just lightly reform the police. You're going to have to do a major overhaul. I mean, you're going to have to rebuild that concept from the foundation up. So, I mean, we're going to dig down below grade, put in a new foundation, and start up. Anything we do less than that is going to lead us right back to where we are today. So when we say reform, I'm just saying, I think it needs to be major, and it's probably going to be painful. Some people are going to lose their jobs, but on the other hand, they probably didn't deserve the job in the first place. So rather than preach a sermon, I'll stop.
But if I may take the handoff, I'm not going to preach a sermon, but you can't say sermon and the preacher not jump in. That we look at the historic roots of even how policing and law enforcement has been enacted in this country. Black people have been on the brunt of police and law enforcement forever. It was established to control Black agency, Black movement, that we were not to be free. The slave codes and the connection with the law enforcement and police force even then, and don't even get us started on how Indiana, this whole 13th Amendment, we weren't even supposed to have movement into the state as Black bodies. So there has to be a radical reformation of law enforcement in Indiana specifically, because that's where we are, but across the country. And my daddy is law enforcement, so don't think I'm bashing blue, but I say the same thing, that law enforcement in this country doesn't love Black bodies and certainly wants to be a policer of Black agency.
Not only law enforcement, but as you hinted, politicians, because the policies that we're discussing were enacted by politicians. And that 13th Amendment she's speaking of in the Indiana Constitution was enacted in 1851. And somebody check me, but if you go to the state of Indiana's website, you can see where that amendment was not actually taken out until like 1994, even though it was ruled by the US Supreme Court to be invalid. Indiana refused to take that part out of the document until the 1990s, when they finally graciously removed it.
Off the books.
Off the books. But that was done in 1851. So yes, she's absolutely right. And that's the kind of thing that we need to understand. So when we go out in the street and we protest and we raise Cain, which we should, we also need to show up at the city council meetings and we need to be informed and push back and say, wait a minute, this is not new. You have been doing this. And some of you politicians have repeatedly done this and found ways to, find excuses for doing it. And we need to push back and show, there's a history behind this, and don't let them get away with the history that they keep trying to bury. Because like I said, Mr. Reed, who was just shot, and everything is not settled in his case. But everybody in Indianapolis, you cannot talk to someone who's not heard of Michael Taylor.
Or Aaron Bailey.
Excuse me?
Or Aaron Bailey.
Or Aaron Bailey. Oh, there's a whole laundry list. But Michael Taylor is probably the best known. But my point is that we can go back to Reconstruction with this in Indiana, where it's continually happened over and over and over again. And we seem to get amnesia, and our politicians, and I'm gonna go there, some of our Black politicians sometimes forget that they need to be advocating for us and thinking about what some of these policies mean long-term. I'll stop.
Thank you for that. And so our next question, recently in Marion County, the City County Council approved a measure that indicated that racism is a health concern. And would anyone like to speak to that? I haven't been able to read that entire statute to see if it has any teeth to it, but if someone could talk about that, I'd appreciate that.
It's been talked about academically for a few years. In fact, and I am not trained in psychology and sociology anywhere near that level, but putting it in, I believe it's called the Diagnostic Statistical Manual, which is something the psychologists use, that racism is a mental illness. I don't know, how I fall out on that spectrum yet, but there are people who are advocating that it should be declared a mental illness. There is reason to believe that that may be valid. There's reason to believe it may not be valid, but it is being talked about as potentially being added to the list of known mental illnesses.
Would anyone else like to jump in on that? Jessica, would you like to speak to that at all?
Am I frozen or is she frozen?
I think.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes. So I was on mute. Sorry about that. So yes, as a public health professional, I was really excited to see that Marion County declared this racism as a public health crisis, because it is. And if you look at all of the different systematic things when it comes to education, employment, health, food deserts, the list goes on, all those different factors impact individuals' health. And in return, those populations or groups of people who are most affected are individuals of color. And so I haven't gotten a chance to read Marion County's because I was reading Ohio's, because I personally want this to be the state of Indiana. But because this is something that I've gone into school for, and I really love that now these conversations about health disparities are coming to the forefront. We're looking at just systems that are not having a strategic foundation to supporting everyone equitably. And so not equally, but equitably, because we're all not given the proper resources in all those different categories. And so I am proud of the fact that the conversation is coming to the forefront, but I'm looking forward to more counties and eventually the state getting to this level of addressing the public health issues, which are rooted from different health outcomes from social determinants of health.
So we're going to go ahead and go to our next question. And this is a really vibrant conversation. If you have a question, if you are watching this, please put it in the Q&A and we'll try to answer as many of the questions as we can at the end of it. So my next question, and I'm going to start with Jessica again. What role do you see for young people ages 25 and younger in social action?
Great question. So with young adults that are under the age of 25, me, myself, I may look like it. I'll take it if you guys think I am. But I think it's very important that young adults understand what it means to be an activist. And in that arena, finding out a specific niche. There's so many different areas and outlets that are very passionate to young adults right now. But I would honestly say, I would focus on the two hashtags that have been making a lot of headway, which are We Are Done Dying and Black Lives Matter. And so with these two hashtags, I think it's very important that our young adults find out what that means, like strategically. What does it mean when it says Black Lives Matter? How long has that taken place? It didn't just start 10 years ago. And so really making sure that we have parents, aunts, uncles, the community empowering the next generation, those individuals who are under 25, and understanding this didn't just start. And so I would say that's the first standpoint. And then secondly, I would encourage young adults to get involved in social media, which they already are, but actually understanding that this is a platform to continue the conversation. So yes, you're doing something in your community, you're getting connected to a civil rights organization that's addressing specific issues, but you're also using your platform on social media to capitalize on that. Everyone has followers, everyone has friends on social media. So just advocating in that outlet. As an activist, I think it's important that when you connect to a specific organization, a civil rights organization, then you can understand what else is provided. So for me, I'm involved in other civil rights organizations as like the NAACP. And what I think is important that young adults understand is every branch in the NAACP has a youth and college division. That division is specifically for young adults who are under the age of 25. And it's structured so that there are individuals who are in college, and then there are individuals who are in high school. So there are college chapters and there are high school chapters. And through this matriculation for our youth, they go from high school, they go on to college in their chapters, and then they graduate onto your young adult committee, which will eventually they get involved in their adult committee. And so I just think it's important that every young adult, any young adult or anyone who knows a young adult under the age of 25 understand that there's work that's being done as we speak along those lines, using those same platforms that Denise spoke about, the virtual meetings, the town hall meetings, the educational sessions and webinars, so individuals can understand, yes, there are issues that are taking place that have been going on years and decades, and this is how we can play a part. And I would just also highlight that young adults getting involved is not the first time in the NAACP. This has been happening for years, but now there's a specific initiative in the 6 Game Changers for the NAACP that focuses on how young adults and youth can get involved and engage. So I will leave it at that.
Would anyone else like to answer that question?
Ms. Hayes, I would just like to add that we got to recognize that the strength of our movement and the strength of the NAACP specifically is the intergenerational membership. We have people as young as middle school and grade school, and we have folks who are in their 90s. One of my coworkers on the national staff is somebody who I served under some 25, 30 years ago, Ms. Mildred Bond Roxborough, who is in her 90s. And it's that perspective that we have when we're able to discuss all across the age spectrum that gives us strength so that we're not reinventing the wheel. I give you an example. When our organization was started, we looked at social justice, we looked at mob violence, we looked at discrimination in economics. Today, that's what some people call intersectionality. And intersectionality is great, except we've been doing it for 110 years. So when I say we don't need to reinvent the wheel, we have things that we've already done. It's not to say that that's it and nothing else can be added, but we need to build on that foundation and go step by step to continue to move forward. If we stop and try to reinvent the wheel, then we move backwards. And our organization is the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, and we don't have a reverse gear. Thank you.
Thank you. Reverend Shonda, did you want to touch on that at all?
Yeah, sure. 18 to 25, first, make sure they're registered to vote. That some of our young adults, this will be the first time that they'll be able to vote in a presidential election. Make sure they are registered and they know how to do it. In the Poor People's Campaign, we have a Moral Fusion student organizing fellowship where we invite young adults from across the entire country, but specifically here in Indiana. I referenced him earlier. Patrick Sailing is our young adult who is helping to organize the college campuses and the community colleges and the Boys and Girls Clubs and the places that young adults frequent. They're right for organizing. So yes, we need activists who are actively advocating on our behalf in social justice, but we need organizers. And that's where 18 to 25-year-olds are really good at. They leverage the platforms and they have conversations and go into spaces with proper social distancing and masks in this season, Lord willing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And so as we're coming to a close, what if everyone can take probably about 30 seconds and share one thing that you think would be most important for us to do moving forward? And I think what we're going to do is go ahead and start with Leon, then Dr. Reed, then Ms. Chapman, then Ms. Denise, and then we'll close out with Reverend John.
As I said when I started out, was become informed, and what I mean by that is pick up a book and read. Come down to the library, to the CBLC, and check out a book. And if it's not in the CBLC, I'm sure you and your staff can find it in the library. That's the only way we're going to get beyond this, is to become informed. And there's, so many books that we could pick up. You don't have to read a lot of them. Just pick up one and start.
Thank you.
I would hope that one of the things that we do is to concentrate on who our real friends are and who our real enemies are, and not to be confused, because there are people who will give lip service to you. There are people who will do all kinds of symbolic gestures to you, and then in 6 to 8 months, you'll find out that those weren't really your friends at all. So we've got to look with a very critical eye at what's going on. We've got to look at the fact that there are more African-American men locked up in prison today than there were slaves in 1857, according to Michelle Alexander, who wrote the book on mass incarceration. And that racial profiling and walking while black and living while black and breathing while black and anything while black is the same type of problem that led to George Floyd and Breonna Taylor being killed. So we have to connect the dots and get together with each other and understand who is your friend and who is your enemy, and don't get it twisted. Thank you.
Thank you. Jessica?
Yes, I would just encourage everyone to please go out and vote. And when I say vote, do your research in who you're voting for. A lot of times, some of us think it's important to focus on a party, but I just say focus on the person and focus on that person's specific interest in, like, education. What are they saying about education? What are they saying about criminal justice? What are individuals saying about health and just economic stability in general? And hold those individuals accountable. You have given them your vote. So now, because I give you my vote, this is what I'm expecting from you. And hold them accountable. Host meetings with them. If once they get into office, just let them know, I will be standing alongside and making sure what you promised me I'm getting. And I think it's just important that we know that we can befriend our elected officials on Facebook. We can follow what they're doing, what they're saying. We have access to them, and they need to hear from us. And that's not just now, but just on a local level. What's happening in our city, county, what's happening with our mayor, our chief of police, any individual, what's happening, so that we know we can get the changes we need on a federal level. So just want to make sure I put that out there, and that we know our history. Very important.
Thank you. Denise?
Well, one, I would say that this is a marathon, not a sprint. That this, to Dr. Reed's point, is intergenerational work. We need all hands on deck. I would encourage everyone to reimagine and to be organized and have conversations, even like this, constant conversations. And then, to my point as an stark environmental climate justice advocate, clean water, clean air, clean soil in which to plant our food. If we don't have that, you can't live to advocate. So we have to advocate for a quality of life, and we need to prepare for the inner panel on climate change is telling us that we only have so many years to address the impacts of climate change. And the youth of the NAACP, we've had even Jessica, we have an incubator of folks that we've worked with in academia and across the nation to educate young people to become environmental climate justice lawyers, to do this environmental climate policy work, the environmental energy work, and to move so that our communities can be more resilient in every aspect, but certainly when it comes to the impacts of climate change.
Thank you. Reverend Shonda?
I would say if you can only do one thing with all your heart. If you have to do one thing in this moment, let your whole heart be in it. Don't be found not doing anything, because the greatest sin that we could ever commit in this moment is to sit on the sidelines. When history is written and retold, let it be told that you did your one thing in the most faithful way that you could, knowing that the God of the universe is calling and compelling you to do it. Now do it and make sure that it counts.
And I will say amen to that sermonette. I appreciate that, Reverend Shonda. So something that we have in the chat is someone mentioned that it's important for us to run for office, and it's important for young people to run for office. And that means we need to support people. That means they need dead presidents. That means they need us to canvass for them. Maybe that's digitally, maybe that's phone banking, you know, whatever that is. But we have to be the change we want to see in the world. And so that's something really, really important. Before I finish, I want to remind everyone of completing the census. If you have not done so, I would encourage you to reach out to 5 of your friends or family members and ask them if they've finished. Yeah. They've extended that timeline because of the quarantine, so you can still go online and finish it. If you haven't finished it by a certain date, they're going to come out to your home. So please finish the census. That will determine representation. It will determine the funding in your area. Census is very important. I'm also a genealogist, so don't be that ancestor that can't be found in 72 years. So I want to encourage everyone to fill out that census. Leon is laughing because he's a genealogist as well. Also, please remember that even though our states have opened up, know what you know. African Americans are 3 times more likely to be harmed and killed by COVID-19. So continue to social distance, continue to wear masks, continue to use hand washing, continue to also use hand sanitizer. So be careful when you're going out. And also remember to register to vote. Again, reach out to 5 people, try to work the polls if you can do that. Just support the change that you want to be in the world. And I would ask you to continue these conversations in smaller groups, in your neighborhood, with your family members, with your nuclear family, and think about, as Reverend Shonda said, what is that one thing you want to do, and you want to do it well. And then also galvanizing your friends. So this has been an amazing, amazing event. Everyone has brought such history and information, and I am just excited and ready to move forward. Please look at the chat. We've got a lot of links in there with a lot of great information. So we're going to leave that chat up for a few minutes. But I just want to thank everyone for coming on this beautiful Saturday. You could have been doing a lot of things, but you were spending time with us. Please support the Center for Black Literature and Culture. You can do a virtual tour by going to ndpl.org/CBLC. We are going to be doing continued programming throughout the year, so continue to look out for us. And that's all we have. And I so appreciate everyone coming to the 3rd annual Center for Black Literature and Culture Book Fest. Thank you so much, panelists. And thank you also, I'm sorry, to Lauren Freeman, to James Myers, to the PPD department at Indianapolis Public Library and the communications department. A lot of people have helped us to get this going, and I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge them. Thank you so much.